Alright, we learned how to put elements on the web page and how to style them. Now we need to learn how to add some functionality to our site, and that's where JavaScript comes in. So JavaScript, unlike CSS and HTML, it's an actual coding language, so it adds logic to code. And with that, I know it sounds really weird, adds logic to code, but what that means is that you can have like user interaction where if one thing does one thing, then something happens. So the website chooses what to do based on what you write, and it's used basically for DOM manipulation, AJAX, and you if I explained it to you right now, you wouldn't really understand it, but I'll explain it later. So since it's hard to explain DOM manipulation and AJAX without knowing the syntax of JavaScript first, we're going to learn the syntax in this video, and then in the next video we'll learn about the DOM manipulation and AJAX, which are the applications of JavaScript. So let's code, let's learn about the syntax. JavaScript. Now remember, JavaScript is used to add functionality to HTML. So kind of like how you can have style tags in CSS. With CSS, for JavaScript you can have script tags, and you can write your JavaScript inside these script tags. You can do it that way, or you can add script tags with the source attribute, and in there you can link a file, so index.js. So that's how you link the HTML and the JS file. So let's go over the syntax. So coding, it's kind of weird. It's like math with words and real things. It's really weird at first, but you'll get used to it, and it's pretty intuitive. So you can declare variables just like in math class, like A, B, C, D. So we're declaring a changeable var equal to this little string of text. So let's a variable. That means let use one of these either const or let for a variable. You can also use var, but you typically don't use var. You use let or const, and use let for variables that you want to change, and use const for constants that you don't want to change. So changeable, not changeable. Now there's a few different types of data that you can assign to variables. You can use the strings of text, and you can use those single quotation marks, double quotes, backticks. Those all work. You can use numbers. You can use booleans, which means either true or false. You can have these arrays, which it's just like a matrix of stuff almost. You can also use objects. These are one kind of object. So cat equals meow, dog equal object literals equals bark. So it's when you have the object literals, it's when you have a key and a value. So cat to meow, dog to bark. You can also have undefined variables when the variable it's not set to anything. There's no value to it. It's not set to anything, and it's called undefined. You can do it two ways, either by not setting it or setting it equal to undefined, so it's not set. And then you have this null data type, which a lot of people get undefined and null confused. Null means nothing, so it has a value, but it's nothing. Undefined is where there's no value. So let's get into some basic logic in JavaScript. You can use these things called if-else statements, where you have the if, and then parentheses, and then a condition, and then you have these brackets, and you could get to say what you want based on that condition. So if number, we declared number up here equal to 44. So if number the triple equal sign. Use the triple equal sign to check the type and the value. If we use the double equal sign, then this would technically be true because it only checks the value, doesn't check the type. And if you use a single equal sign, it's the same as setting it equal to a new value. So you want to use the triple equal sign usually. So if number equals to 44, number plus plus. So that just means add 1. You can also do minus minus to subtract 1. Else if, so if that's not true, although it is true, if that's not true and instead it equals to 24, which it doesn't, then we can set the number to this. Or else if it's neither of these two, we do this on it. Now if you run the if statement, since it's equal to 44, it'll just be the number. It won't do any of these other things. But if it wasn't, it might do any of these too. You can add as many else ifs as you want, but there can only be one if and one else. Yeah. Okay, switch statements. It's another kind of logic thing. Condition. Yeah. Where we're putting the number in here into the switch statement, and it's checking the value of the number. So if number is 44, then we want to set it to 2, and then we want to get out of the switch statement. If number is 45, we want to set it to 2, and then we can break out. In default, if like neither of these is correct, then this is like the default thing that happens. Now we've went over some basic logic. Let's go over loops. So for loops, you use for loops when you want like a set number of times it runs, like a specific 10 times, 19 times, or whatever, or you want to like go over like a list, and you have the for thing, then you have these parentheses, and you set a variable, your starting variable. So we're setting a starting variable of I to 0. So we start at 0, and then we go until I is we go while I is less than 10. So as soon as I hits 11, then it's going to stop. So this tells you when to go, when to stop, this is when to start. And then this is the step. So I plus plus, you're going by 1 each time, because I plus plus means add 1. So we're adding 2 to I every time we go through, so it'll keep on going until it gets to 11. Now there's also while loops, which are kind of like for loops, but they're simpler. So while j, we set j to 0. J is less than or equal to 10. So while it's less than or equal to 10. So once it hits 10 or 11, it's going to stop. It's going to stop at 10 actually, but it's not going to go until 11. So we're setting text, number is, and then the j value, and we're adding j each time, and then we're logging it. We'll see this a lot in the future. We're logging it to the browser. We'll get into that when you learn about DOM manipulation and AJAX. So functions, when you want to repeat code like a bunch of times, you can use a function. We're calling this function add, and it takes in num1 and num2. You don't need these, but these are like if you want to pass in values. And it returns num1 plus num2. So it adds these two together, and then the value of the function is this statement here. That's what the return means. That means set like the value of this function to this thing here. And then subtract. This is called an arrow function. It's another way of writing a function. You could set it like as a variable, so const subtract equals, then this lines up with this, and then you have an arrow. You'll see this a lot nowadays in modern JavaScript with the arrow functions. And then to use functions, we wrote the functions, we need to call them. So we can call subtract, and then we have the things here, and we pass in num1 and num2, so 4 and 2. So the result of this subtract thing here will be 2 because it subtracts num1 from num2. Now, here I also did another thing. We can pass in functions to functions. So add 4 plus 5, that's 9. It'll be 9 in here, and then it'll subtract 4 from 9. So this will give us 5. Okay, let's move on to classes now. And classes confuse a lot of people. If you've coded in another language besides JavaScript, JavaScript actually doesn't have classes. This is actually like a syntactic sugar. JavaScript uses prototypes, but I'm going to teach you classes just because it's easier to wrap your head around. So a class, it's just a folder filled with a bunch of functions and variables. However, the variables are called attributes, and the functions are called methods. So we created this little rmath class, so we can do some math, with pi equals to that, and Euler's number equal to that. We added some methods down here. So that's classes. You have your oh, notice how you also don't have to like write function. You don't have to do that in inside classes. So in order to use a class, you have to instantiate it, where you do const math instance equals new rmath. So you kind of like this, you have to kind of call it, but you instantiate it. That's what you do. So this is how you instantiate it, with the new keyword, new class name, and you set it to a variable. So math instance, or instance of the class, dot Euler, so that'll return this value, and then we can also use it to add. So math instance dot add 1 plus 2, and that'll give us 3. Now down here I have another function. It has this thing called a constructor. If you noticed in functions, you can pass in these things into the parameters. Now classes usually don't have that, so you need a constructor to do that. So in this, you can pass in a type of plane, like a F-22 Raptor or something like that, or a Boeing. Yeah, you can pass that into the class in the instances you put here, and that sets the type. So this dot plane, this keyword, it refers to the thing in the class. So if there's like a plane out here, a plane variable, it'll ignore that. Whenever you're using variables inside classes, you need the this keyword. And you can get the type by using this function. You can set it using this function. And then you can also inherit from functions. So a jet, it's a type of plane. So jet extends plane. It takes the stuff from plane. Here's it to her stuff. And inside the constructor, you have to pass in which things you want from the plane constructor, and then you call super with the same stuff in here, super, to get all the stuff inside the plane function. So super inside this constructor gets all the values that it's extending from. And there's another method there. Okay, so the big class, I know we created rmath up here, but JavaScript comes with a math class like default. So you can also do math.py. You can round numbers, math.random. This is one of JavaScript's default classes. There's also a date class. And then we'll get into the document in the window. Objects or classes. Yeah, objects in the future. So going back up to here, the data types, you can do all sorts of things to the data types. And I have these links if you want to check them out. But the string, you can get the length of the string. That'll be like 23, I think. Oh yeah, you can combine strings and variables using these backticks. These are backticks, not quotations. Then you have this money to include the variable in there with strings. And then I listed some, you can find the index of k inside here. It'll tell you where it is in there. And I listed some more different functions you can use on strings or methods right here. This is a great resource for learning JavaScript if you want to check out some more functions. Same thing with the numbers. This turns this string into a number. I know this looks like a number, but it's actually a string of text. So it parses it into an integer. And then arrays, you can sort it from array.sort. We're calling the sort method or function on this array. And it sorts it from least or alphabetically. And then the 0 arrays start from 0. So here we're getting the 0th value. So it would be running, but since we're calling sort first, it would be biking, since we're going to rearrange it alphabetically. But this gets the first value in arrays, 0. 1 would get the middle one, 2 would get the last one. Do that 0, and you can check out more of the different methods and functions for the arrays and objects. So there we go. There's just a basic overview of the syntax. In the next video, we'll talk about the DOM manipulation AJAX stuff to really understand the applications of JavaScript. You don't have to memorize all of this, just understand the principles, understand what's going on. You'll learn what all of these are just by practicing. So just understand the concepts, and you got this. Nice job.